Are we ready to proceed? Okay. Is Miss McLean there? I think I see her. Okay. Are we ready to proceed? Okay. Good afternoon, and welcome to this online hearing in the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial tribunal appointed by City Council to make decisions on certain types of applications under the Planning Act. My name is John Blatherwick, and I will be chairing this hearing today. With me are my fellow panel members, Bonnie Oak-Charon, Stan Wilder, and Heather McLean. Please take note that this video conference is being live streamed on YouTube. The video will be archived along with today's agenda on the city's website. Before we begin, we have a few items to outline for your information. While the issues surrounding development in the city are broad, our mandate is quite limited. The committee cannot consider aspects of the proposals that are not related to the required variances: noise, pollution, property maintenance, property values, prosecution for illegal construction, personal comments regarding neighbors, agents, or applicants, additional variances without proper public notice. If there is an identified need for an additional variance or variances, including an increase in the extent of the relief required, a recirculation of the application is required. As part of the statutory notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. And I note from my speakers list today that that did not happen, so there will have to be a sworn oath for the sign posting required for each of the applications we'll deal with today. Regarding quorum, if this is lost during the hearing due to technical difficulties, the proceedings will be paused to allow time for the resolution of the issue. Failing the ability to reinstate quorum, hearing of the items remaining will resume at the outset of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the committee. In terms of the hearing process, listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Note that committee members have reviewed the application materials prior to this hearing and any written submissions received in support or in opposition. In addition, the committee will hear today oral submissions from any interested parties as part of our proceedings. The committee may ask for a brief presentation by the applicant, followed by questions from the members where clarification may be needed. The public submissions portion of the hearing will then begin, and any interested parties will be invited to make their submissions to the committee. Panel members may then ask follow-up questions where additional clarification may be required. When you are called upon to provide your comments, we will ask you to do the following. Start with stating your name and municipal address for the record. We may ask you to spell your name. Then begin your submission by addressing your comments to the panel members. You may ask questions, but please direct them only to the chair. Please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the committee's discretion. Once all interested parties have had an opportunity to address the panel, the public submissions portion of the hearing will then be closed. The committee will then make an oral decision to either grant or deny the application. The committee may also choose to reserve its decision. In such case, the panel will deliberate further on the evidence presented immediately following adjournment of the public hearing. In either case, the committee will send within 10 days of its decision and to all parties and to those who have requested it, a written decision that sets out the reasons for the decision. All decisions of the committee are subject to a 20-day appeal period, during which the decision can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a fee. Before we begin, are there any declarations of interest for any of the members for either items on this panel's agenda or the other two today? Seeing none, okay. We have, I believe we also have, just lost my piece of paper, sorry folks. I lost my the notes on the minutes to adopt. We have minutes to adopt from the 1st of June 2022 and the 15th of June 2022. Regarding the 1st of June, are there any amendments that needed to be made to this to these minutes? All in favor of adopting the minutes as provided? Okay. And regarding the 15th of June 2022, same question, any adjournments or any Any amendments needed to be made to these minutes? All in favor of adopting the minutes from the 15th of June 2022? The minutes are so adopted. We will now move to the agenda items, and the first items will deal with our adjournments. And we have an adjournment request on item 10, and this is a request from the planning department and agreed to by the applicant's agent. So for item 10, the planning department, please articulate the request for adjournment.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The plans have been updated to address the zoning non-compliance issues that were noted during the first review. However, there are still outstanding concerns from forestry, and an adjournment will allow time for the agent to coordinate with forestry staff to address the tree concerns and/or revise the plans as necessary. And it's also understood that the site plan might have additional revisions, and staff note that if they change the extent of the variances, a recirculation might be required, and if it's more onerous than the original request.
So we're not sure whether or not there will be additional variances or revisions to the variances?
Not from my understanding. I haven't received updated plans yet.
Okay. Is the agent for the applicant there?
Yes, Mr. Chair. My name is Justina Garbos of WSP Canada, Inc.
Yep. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're in agreement with this adjournment?
I am, and having spoken to my client who is reconsidering his options to move forward either with this project, I would ask that it be adjourned sine die.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that it's probably wise to adjourn this sine die, given the fact that we're not sure that if there will be additional variances or extensions or additions to variances requested. Okay. All right. The panel members, all in favor of adjourning this application sine die? The application is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Committee.
Okay. We'll now move to the regular agenda. And the first item we'll deal with this afternoon is item 1 on the agenda, 87 Melrose. And I believe Ms. McQuaig is the agent for the applicant.
Yes, that's correct. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Mr. Arjun Sewer from my office will be doing the presentation, but I can do the oath, or Mr. Sewer can as well.
All right. Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I affirm.
Okay. This application is to permit reduced lot area, front yard, rear yard, and interior side yard setback, front facade, canopy projection, and parking for the conversion to a low-rise apartment dwelling.
Correct.
And we understand, the committee understands that the site plan process has begun for this application. And how far along is that site plan application process?
At this stage, we've received the first round of comments, which we've gone through, and we've also had our public meeting, and we've met with the councillor as well. Given the small nature of changes, we're obviously quite a ways through the process, and the site plan file lead, Mr. J.C. Renault, was comfortable with us submitting the Committee of Adjustment application when he did, and he is in support of the proposed changes to the site.
Okay.
Thank you.
And for the committee's a little curious, how many occupied units are in this dwelling right now?
I understand there are 3 currently. There was the intent to do a 4th, but obviously planning applications needed to take place before that could occur.
And you're aware of the order to comply that was issued in 2017?
Yes, I did see that.
And the fact that that order to comply is still outstanding, what items or what parts of that order to comply are still outstanding, if you wouldn't mind filling us in?
That component of it, I'm not sure what items are outstanding at this point. I think we need to continue through this process before the order to comply would be lifted in terms of the Committee of Adjustment approvals.
Clarify or you'd settle it, or satisfy the order to comply with our approval for a fourth unit, basically.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Mr. Sewer, if you wouldn't mind with a brief presentation on this application.
Sure, I believe we have submitted slides. Great, thanks. So good afternoon, Honorable Chair and members of the committee. My name is Arjun Soor, and I'll be presenting our client's application for minor variances at 87 Melrose Avenue. Next slide, please. So subject property is an interior lot located on the east side of Melrose Avenue in Hintonburg. Next slide, please. The property is designated general urban area in the current official plan and neighborhood in the inner urban transect in the new official plan. It's also part of the evolving overlay in the new OP, and it's zoned R4UB residential fourth density subzone UB. Next slide, please. So the property has an area of 257.51 square meters, a frontage of 10.06 meters, and a depth of 25.6 meters. Next slide, please. So these are just some images of the site, and you'll note, of course, that the building's already constructed and there's no alterations happening to the exterior. Next slide, please. So the proposed development is to modify the existing 3-unit dwelling by adding a 4th unit in the basement. For zoning purposes, this converts the building into a low-rise apartment building. Development also involves the removal of 1 parking space in the rear yard, the provision of additional landscaping, trees and amenity spaces, and improvement of the bike parking and garbage areas. Next slide, please. So this image just shows the site plan with the requested variances highlighted in red. The plan also shows where new soft landscaping and trees have been added, where the parking reduction is, and where the garbage area and bike parking improvements are taking place. Next slide, please. And these are just the proposed elevations for the building, again, with the variances noted in red. Next slide, please. These are just more elevations than north-south elevations. Next slide, please. So these are a list of the requested variances. I won't read them all, but I think it should be noted that variances C and E were previously secured in 2015 and are being reobtained, while variances B, F, G, and H are in response to provisions that did not exist when the original variances were approved in 2015. Next slide, please. So I'll now move into discussing the 4 tests, beginning with whether the variances are considered minor. So the proposed lot area is considered minor, as the previously approved lot area variance in 2015 required a lot area of 360 square meters, and this proposal is a lesser reduction. Additionally, the max density of 8 units on a permitted 300 square meter lot would actually be more impactful from an intensity and density perspective than what's being proposed. So the proposed lot could sufficiently accommodate the building. The proposed rear yard setback of 6.43 meters is also considered minor, as it was compliant with the previous 6.4 meter requirement, but doesn't comply with new provisions. So it's simply a technical variance. Furthermore, the ground floor is set back 8.22 meters, which exceeds the bylaw requirement and ensures that the proposed rear yard setback doesn't impact the amount of landscaping that's provided in the rear yard. The proposed interior yard setback is also considered minor, as it was compliant for a 3-unit dwelling, but not for a low-rise apartment. However, since the built form is not being changed, the amount of light access and space would remain the same without any impact from the additional unit. And lastly, the proposed front yard setback is considered minor, as it was previously approved and is not changing, and is therefore fairly technical as well. Next slide, please. The proposed canopy projection is also considered minor, as it was also previously obtained, and the canopy, again, is not going to be altered. So the variance is fairly technical as well, and it just recognizes an existing condition. The reduced percentage of windows is also considered minor, as there's still sufficient transparency provided, and the building has a similar level of fenestration as other multi-unit dwellings that are provided along Melrose Avenue. The reduced setback of the front facade is also minor, as a 0.7 meter difference in the required front facade setback versus the proposed setback is not something that can be distinguished from the street, and it still meets the intent of breaking up the facade and providing facade articulation. And then lastly, the proposed parking space reduction is also considered minor, as it still results in a reduction from the 2 spaces that are currently provided, and is really only being retained as the current tenant uses that parking space, and they would be negatively impacted by removing that space. Next slide, please. So the variances also meet the intent of the official plan to accommodate a mix of residential dwelling types and support the increased density to meet housing targets, as it increases the site's density by adding another unit, but still retaining the same built form. Proposal also enhances the site with additional soft landscaping, new trees, and improved garbage and bike parking areas. It also meets the OP's intent to support a transition towards 15-minute communities with increased density, reduced parking space, and improved bike parking areas, helping to better support active and public transportation use. Next slide, please. So the variances also meet the combined intent of minimum lot dimensions and setbacks to ensure that new development has soft landscaping, amenity area, light and air between buildings, and no intrusive overlook or adverse impact on neighbors. The variances also meet the intent of the minimum fenestration requirement and front facade setback to ensure that well-designed building facades are provided and that adequate light provision is included as well. Overall, the proposal has no adverse impacts on neighbors while representing a marked improvement of the site, adding a new unit, reducing parking, and providing more soft landscaping and trees, which overall meets the zoning intent. Next slide, please.
So from Mr. Sewer,
Sure.
regarding amenity open space, 4-unit apartment building, what are you required to provide and how much are you providing?
I believe the soft landscaping, if we could go to the site plan, I believe that would show how much is being provided. So I think that was, I'm not sure what the slide number there is. I think the site plan is on slide 7. Yeah,
Okay.
there we go. So you can see there that the amenity area that is being provided, the new soft landscaping, is 41.8 square meters. That's 30.9% of the site landscaped area.
And the requirement, to be clear, Mr. Chair, is 35 square meters. So we exceed that in the rear yard.
Yeah.
So if you eliminated that parking space in the rear, you'd be significantly increasing the amount of amenity open space.
Yes, you would be increasing that. But again, there's a significant reduction already being provided by removing one parking space. And that parking space is there because there is a resident who uses that space. And so it really strikes a balance between the resident who currently needs that space, but also providing a lot more landscaped area.
Okay. All right. Okay, please proceed.
Okay, thanks. So I think if we could jump to slide 15, I think it should be. I'll continue from there. If we could jump to, slide 15, I think. Should be the third last slide. Or the fifth last slide. I'm no longer seeing the presentation, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if that's how it looks on your end as well. Okay, there we go. Technical difficulties.
Blame Rogers.
So which slide did you want to go to? I had frozen there.
Oh, sorry. So that's slide 15, please. Discussion of whether the variances are suitable and desirable. Awesome, thanks. So the proposed development with requested variances are also considered a suitable and desirable use of land, as the building is consistent with the surrounding built form and development and adds to the diverse mix of housing types in the area. It also accommodates additional housing through intensification and aligns with the intent of the PPS, both official plans and the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So thus, it is the opinion of Q9 Planning and Design that the proposed minor variances constitute good land use planning. Next slide, please. So now we will take some questions and comments. You may have.
So if we're looking at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 8 variances, you just for the sake of clarifying it for myself and the rest of the members, which of these are existing conditions and which are not?
Yeah. So the ones that were previously secured were C and E.
Well, let's just go through A to H.
Yeah,
Just
let's
tell
go
me.
through. Sure.
Just tell me what's existing and what's not.
Hang on, I'm just going to pull that up. We also have a slide that actually shows the variances. I don't know if that might be helpful to put up there as well.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will take you through
Sure.
the variances and advise which ones are existing conditions.
Yep.
So variance A related to lot area is existing condition. Variance B related to the minimum rear yard setback is also existing condition.
Okay.
Same with variance C for the front yard. Variance D for the interior yard.
Okay.
Canopy protection, variance E, as well as variance F and G with regards to the front facade and the articulation variance for variance G. Variance H is an interesting one. It is related to the existing condition, given that the parking space is related to a leased unit, and I expect that parking space was identified in that lease. But we are reducing from 2 to 1. But to your point, even though it's an existing condition, it was legally permitted, those 2 spaces, for the 3-unit dwelling whenever it was constructed previously.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. McQuaig. Mr. Wilder, you had a question.
Ms. McQuaig, when was that 4th unit built? Was that in the original building as a secondary dwelling unit?
No, it was not. This was a purpose-built 3-unit dwelling, and then following construction and following occupancy, they wanted to utilize the basement space for a unit as opposed to mechanical or storage or what have you. They did preliminary start construction, and then obviously were advised by Building Code Services that they needed to obtain approvals before they could finalize the construction and renovation for a legal 4th unit. And so everything was put on hold, and that brings us to today, getting those approvals in order to secure that 4th unit.
Okay.
So a building permit was issued for that 4th unit. When was that done?
A building permit has not been issued for the 4th unit.
I see. So this is what's required now before they'll issue a building permit.
Correct.
So your
correct.
client went ahead and created that space without the benefit of a building permit.
To be clear, they were going to start construction to renovate the space, but they did not proceed with it, and they did not finish it. They do need to finalize these processes before they can actually create that space and finish it and secure that permits.
Well, that's what was confusing to me. So in other words, they're converting that basement space. They began work, and then it was recognized that variances would be required to ultimately get the permit for that.
That's correct. And I think it's the difficulty between the provisions that would have been in place for a 3-unit, and then once you add that 1 additional unit in the basement, there's generally confusion between where a secondary dwelling unit is, where it makes sense, or not where it makes sense, but where it actually applies. And where in some cases like this, when you do add a basement unit, it becomes a low-rise apartment because you're going from 3 units to 4 units. And so that changes the entire set of provisions and led us down the process of having to submit for site plan control and submit for a minor variance application.
So at the moment, the space is not, obviously you're saying, is only partially built. Is that right?
I believe that is the case. Yes. Yeah. It has never been occupied.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilder. Ms. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wonder if I could get clarification on the wording of variance H for the parking space. And maybe this is to the city planner as well. Whereas the bylaw, my take is, does not permit any parking for a low rise. And we've, in our notice, put requires no parking. And I see that as a slight difference. So I just wondered if we could clarify the correct wording of the bylaw requirement. And then secondly, I wonder if the applicant's agents could explain how that parking space functions. How does it back up I understand it shares a driveway, but is there a registered right of way there with the other property? So those
Through
are
you,
my two questions.
Thank you. I will let staff speak to the first question, but to the second question with regards to the right-of-way, there is a registered right-of-way, and it does span across to the lot to the south as well. And there's actually over 3 meters of right-of-way space there, and the parking space, because it's set in and a little bit further away from the ground floor projection, there is that room to maneuver. They have obviously a little bit of the right-of-way in that back area as well. So there is that functional space, and it's easier for them also if they reverse back out, but the space was approved through the right of way with the existing parking spaces there, and they have done the turn radius analysis as well.
Okay, thank you. I just wonder if planning could clarify that wording.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the provision does read no motor vehicle parking space is permitted. So you would be correct. For our purposes, for staff, we would be comfortable with either.
So we can change that, the wording of that variance to make it a little more clear. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Anything else, Ms. McLean?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. We also had two other speakers, and thank you, Ms. McQuaig and Mr. Soar. We also had two other speakers on the list. Cheryl Parrott from the Hintonburg Community Association. Is she there?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Your address for the record, please.
132 Bayview Station Road.
Okay, please proceed.
The Hintonburg Community Association objects to variances H to permit the one parking space. This property was substandard for the original triplex that was built. It had a lot of variances. The zoning's changed in the meantime, but it's still substandard for a 4-unit apartment. And if you could put up slide 1, please. The applicant owns the abutting properties on the north and south, and all of them have the rear yards completely paved for parking. So the subject property is the one in the middle that's got sort of the white outline on the roof. We're happy to see the proposed green space at the rear of the building. However, this building still does not meet the rear yard setback, and the rear yard would be further reduced by the proposed parking space. Previous iterations of the plan provided to us last fall showed no parking space. However, the plan's been redrawn to put a small strip of green along the north side to try to make it compliant within the required 35 meters square green space. Bollards or fencing will be required to prevent this rear yard green space from being used as turning radius for vehicles parking in the rear yard at 91 Melrose, which is to the bottom of the screen, and possibly 85 Melrose. So the tenants from 91 Melrose stated at a meeting that they need to drive into the parking area behind 87 Melrose to be able to get into their parking space at 91 Melrose. And I suspect the same thing would happen with 87 Melrose. It's very tight. Next slide, please. The strip of grass along the north side proposed, which is on the right side of the car, will be unusable without fencing to protect it. It will just become part of the driveway of the neighboring Concord property, 85 Melrose. It's also an area where the downspout pours a roof full of water, so it really gushes out there down the driveway, etc. Next slide, please. When 87 Melrose was built, the front yard was hardscaped and vehicles were parking there. This hardscaping has been removed and the front yard is mostly weeds, as you can see in the next slide. So if you could bring the next slide up, please. And we request that the front yard be landscaped with low maintenance plants to prevent parking from happening, because without anything there, it's very tempting for it just to become a parking spot. The weeds are bigger or shorter, but they're always weeds. Next slide, please. We're pleased to see 2 trees on the plan for the rear yard. but we're concerned about the placement so close to the rear lot line. So you can see from the photo, it's not very deep. There are issues along the rear of the property due to grade differences with the property to the east or rear. And we're concerned that a retaining wall will need to be built and that trees planted nearby would be lost. So planting them a little bit further forward would be a wise thing to do. So in conclusion, parking is prohibited for apartments on lots under 450 meters square. So this lot's more than 40% smaller than required to allow parking. The rear of the 3 contiguous properties owned by Concord are moonscapes. The property needs as much green space as possible and should be required to meet the bylaw without that useless strip between the building and the adjacent driveway. So we submit that variance H does not conform to the general intent of the zoning bylaw. It's not minor in nature, and it is certainly not desirable for the appropriate development of this property. So we ask you to reject this variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parrott. We also had a Mr. Augu from 72 Francis Street who wished to speak to this application. Is he there?
Mr. Chair, he doesn't seem to be on the call today. If he is here, if he could raise his hand, I'll bring him in.
Okay. I'm guessing no.
Nope, I'm not.
Okay, all right, Ms. McQuaig, Mr. Sewer, you've heard from the Hintonburg Community Association. Would you like to respond to their comments?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair.
Please do.
I just want to clarify on the matter of the rear landscaped area. The percentage and the amount that we're providing is only calculated to the provided rear yard and not to the interior side yard green area that's shown. That green area is sort of a hopeful element, and if it is not something that's viable, it's not critical to or it's not related to the area of soft landscaping that we're showing as provided for the rear yard. Those calculations kind of stop at the point of the provided rear yard from the ground floor. So that is compliant regardless of whether that green space on the interior side yard is there or not. For the matter of the vehicles turning to the property to the south, it was always intended that those properties to the south would have to utilize part of 87 in order to maneuver, and that's why the right of way is there, and that's why we've positioned the garbage location and the bike parking and the single parking space in the way that it is, because it's set in a little bit and allows that bit of extra hardscape for them to maneuver. And with the garbage being located where it is and the bike parking located where it is, it sort of keeps the green space protected from those maneuverabilities that might be excessive or unnecessary when they maneuver their vehicles. But the right of way and the additional hardscape that is there is sufficient to allow those vehicles the turning movements that they need to have.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anything else, Mr. McQuaig?
I'm trying to think whether there was other, on the matter of the front landscaping, I know they had tried other items of front landscaping, and it is difficult in the winter whenever the sidewalks get cleared and snow piles up in front. So the client will certainly have to try and determine what hardy species would be able to support that space, but that is something that we've discussed for sure.
There's also the option of putting in raised measures, like a plant bed.
Yes, or boulders, which is another option that the client is willing to do for sure too. We just need to make sure that staff would be in support of that.
Okay. All right. Well, staff don't support front yard parking, so I think that they probably support this. Anyway.
Yeah, only, Mr. Chair, the only hiccup with raised measures is the sidewalk clearing. They usually want offsets from the sidewalk. So we'd have to make sure that whatever we do have would just be offset the required amount for the city purposes.
And how much would that offset be?
I believe it's 500 millimeters. So 1/2 meter.
Yeah.
But that would still allow the space to be unusable for any parking purposes for sure.
Yeah, okay. All right. I think what we're going to do after hearing from you folks and the community association is we're going to reserve on this application, and we'll be issuing our decision in 10 days. Thank you very much, everyone, for your input.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
The next application on the agenda is item 2. Five Ridgeway. And this is an application to permit a front-facing garage and reduced front yard setback for the construction of a 2-story addition. And we note that planning staff are opposed to this application. The agent for the applicant is Ms. Thompson. Ms. Thompson, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
And for the record, your address.
It's 404 Mackay Street.
Okay. All right. And the Ms. Linker from the planning department is here as well, I believe. All right.
Can we get
Mr. Chair.
the oath
Okay,
read,
and
Mr. Chair?
All right, could you articulate the before I do anything? Ms. Thompson, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I so affirm.
Good. I made it through the oath or declaration problem once. Oh, all right. So, Ms. Linker, please articulate the city's objection to this application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The proposed driveway deviates from the streetscape character analysis as it is not consistent with the streetscape's dominant characteristics. Therefore, the proposed minor variance is not complement with the zoning bylaw. The need for the front yard setback variance appears to accommodate the design oriented around a front yard or front-facing attached garage, where such a feature is not a dominant pattern according to the streetscape character analysis outcome. Therefore, the department opposes the application.
Okay. So, Ms. Thompson, you've heard from the department, and the committee is wondering, where is the front yard on this property?
Yes, perhaps we could put up the site plan.
Yes, that'd be good.
The design variance drawing, which is
Yeah.
to be the second slide.
Yeah.
It would be the not this set of slides, but the second attachment. Yeah, that one right there. The way it works is that that's it. Yeah, the arced property line to the right side of the screen is the front yard. It is slightly shorter than the combination of the two property lines further to the left, which is what makes that the front yard setback, and the angle complies with the definition in order for that to be front yard setback.
The diagram I'm looking at, the arc is on the left-hand side.
There's two arcs, I guess. There's a concave and a convex. So
Okay, all right.
So it's the arc on the right. There's another arc on the left.
Okay. All right. Okay, so, and I guess regarding the second variance, exactly where is that on this site plan?
If you look, there's a box at the 1.52 meter dimension, which is about in the center top.
Yep.
So that 1.52 meters is from the corner of the new mudroom to the property line. There's a similar 1.52 meter setback at the left corner of the garage as well. And then there's a curved line that cuts about through the doorway of the mudroom and meets the right-hand corner of the garage, which would be the required setback.
Okay. And the distance from the property line to the sidewalk?
It
Looks to be-
varies, but it's 3.93 meters at the closest point, which is at the corner of the mudroom, and then that increases by another couple meters at the far corner. So the total distance of the addition to the sidewalk varies between 4.54 and 6.6 meters from the closest edge of the sidewalk.
Okay. And so is there a reason why you can't meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw regarding the setbacks?
Yes, we looked at that option with respect to the garage portion of the building. If you imagine taking the permitted depth on the lot between the front yard setback and the rear yard setback is just wide enough to accommodate a garage. If we originally looked at taking the garage and rotating it slightly counterclockwise, we determined early on that in order to maintain the mature trees at the front, especially the one just to the left of the driveway, that it was critical to maintain the existing driveway location. So we needed to work with that. One option would have been to keep a straight driveway, but that would have had the effect of as we rotated the addition, it would have moved out towards the side property line and back towards the rear property line. And we had discussions with the neighbor where we marked out the proposed footprint on the site. And we realized that by rotating the addition as we have done it so that the left corner of the garage doesn't comply with the setback, it had beneficial impacts on moving the sidewall of the addition further away from the neighbor, therefore improving their life and privacy. And it also pushed the back wall of the addition further from the neighbor to the south, who has a very prized garden. It also meant that the light to the living space at the back of the existing house and their amenity area was larger than if we pushed that whole garage over and back in order to comply with the front yard setback. So that we felt, especially because there was such a wide street frontage resulting in a big distance from the street, that it was in the interest and to the benefits of the neighbors with their discussion to ask for the front yard variance rather than pushing the building right back as we could have to the side yard and to the rear yard. Also, we were trying to match the sawtooth pattern. The building is located in an irregular spot on the site. So instead of just doing a flat wall across that met the setback, by doing a series of sawtooths where some of those corners were passed, we thought it actually reduced the massing and tied in better with the look of the existing house. So those were all the reasons behind our decision of where to locate the garage on the site.
Okay. And as far as your response to the department's objection to the garage, how many? I guess the question is how many houses on this block have a front-facing garage?
Yes. Okay. If we could move to the second slide, I believe, just the one number 38. This is the document that was provided to us as the streetscape character analysis concurrence, and we've added the green, blue, and red circles to further analyze that. So therefore, I should clarify that the driveway itself is compliant. It's the front-facing attached garage that is not. So under the garage carport provisions, there are two options. One is an front-facing attached garage or carport, and then there's another option, which is no front-facing garage or carport. So 7 of the 19 lots that we looked at do have a front-facing attached garage and carport, and we've circled those in the green. You can see that number 16 and 14 immediately to the east of the property do have attached front-facing garages and carports close to the street, and number 125 Ridgeway does as well. The only other property in the immediately adjacent ones is one Ridgeway, which has a detached front-facing garage, which is very close to the front wall of the street and close to the house, so it has very much the same impact. So what we find is that of the adjacent houses on each other side, they have a very similar result, and there are a number of other attached garages or carports in the neighborhood. What we further did was break down the other category, which is the dominant characteristic, and it fell into two different categories. 7 of those, including the existing property, have a front-facing detached garage or carport. And as in the case of our garage, it's in the front yard setback and it's not complying with the interior. Many of them are in the interior yard, some are in the rear yard. So there's a real mix of visible detached garages and carports in the neighborhood as well. So that of the 20 properties, including our own, 14 of those have a garage or a carport, either attached or detached. And then the majority of the properties that do not have a garage, 5 of those have a front yard parking without a legal parking space behind the front wall of the house. So we would contend that it's a very mixed neighborhood, most of which do have a garage or carport, which is visible from the street, facing the street. And we are not the dominant characteristic because they are not all attached garages and carports, but I believe it still has the same streetscape impact.
Okay.
I'd also like to note, in response to a couple of the comments about the precedent that would be set, this streetscape analysis is quite unusual because our property is right on a corner at the intersection of 2 streets. And the way you choose the lots, actually, if we could go back to that diagram, it's still useful. That we had to pick these particular 19 lots because we were right at the intersection of 2 streets, so that anyone else doing a streetscape character analysis, normally it also includes the properties across the street. Because of our very particular location with public amenities across the street, we couldn't do the streetscape character analysis in the typical way, so that if anyone else in future is doing an analysis, the houses that they're looking at will be different from this set of 20, because that's based on their particular location on a lot. So for example, if someone on Rockcliffe Way would be looking at the houses across the street as well as the ones adjacent, and not the same 20 properties. If we get the minor variance, then that would mean that 8 out of the 19 properties would have an attached front-facing garage or carport as the dominant characteristic, and that still would not allow a garage. If another neighbor was using the same 20 houses, we're also to get a minor variance, that would still be 9 out of 19, and it would still not permit someone else to be able to do this as a right. So we don't feel that granting this variance allows anyone else to move forward. And I think, quite honestly, like the neighbor who's written in a letter of support, most people in the neighborhood would think that nicely designed attached garage would be an improvement on either a very old detached garage or the front yard parking that is the dominant characteristic in the neighborhood.
Okay. So you couldn't do the streetscape character analysis the normal way because of the institutional uses across the street from your client's home.
That's correct.
Because there wouldn't be 21 lots, 21 houses.
That's correct, yes.
So the methodology you used was approved by the department?
Yes, we worked with them. So this is the official methodology. So it's more just the point that it's not actually reflective of the houses on both sides of the street the way it normally would be. And if someone else were to do this analysis, they wouldn't be looking at the same 19 or 20 houses necessarily.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Any questions from the members of the panel on this application? Go to the 4 tests, Ms. Thompson. You wouldn't mind.
So the first test, whether the variance meets the general intent of the official plan. We're designated general urban area under the 2003 plan and the interurban transect of the council approved plan. Under both of these, this is a permitted use, and it supports the idea of intensification and having a range of housing types. This is for a family of 5, so 2 adults and their 3 school-age children. And so the community was originally built with very small houses. The family now has a garage that is so small they can't park inside it, and they work and go to school nearby, so they do use alternate modes of transportation. And part of our goal was to provide room for bikes and scooters and a car inside the garage, so that we don't have the current situation of parking on the street. The second floor of the addition provides 2 additional bedrooms, so that there's 1 bedroom for each child, and there's office space so that they can work at home. We were very concerned about protecting the tree canopy. We did a tree report, spoke to the city arborist, and completely revised our design around trying to preserve or finding a way to preserve all the existing trees, both in the road allowance on the neighboring properties, so that we have steps in place to ensure the survival of all of those. The second test, that the variance maintains the general intent of the zoning bylaw. As I mentioned, we think that an attached garage in this location is an appropriate part of a very even mix of attached garages, detached garages, and driveway parking. And in particular, because the 2 adjacent houses, which are the ones on each side of the property, which are the ones in this case that form the important streetscape, also have either a similar, 3 of the 4 have an attached garage carport near the front of the house, and the 4th has a detached garage also near the front of the house. We think that it's an improvement on the existing situation. There is already a garage in place. It's 1.41 meters from the property line, which makes it in the front yard. It's also over the side yard setback, so that we're providing a garage that is further back, both from the front yard and the side yard, so that we believe that that is more compliant with the zoning bylaw than the existing situation. And that the design of the building and the setbacks have taken into account the streetscape. The third test is that the variance is desirable and appropriate for the development of the lands. It's, as the neighbor at 16 Rockcliffe Way put it, it's replacing an old eyesore with, and the neighbor across the street with something that they will think will be an attractive addition to the neighborhood. And finally, the 4th test, whether the variance is minor in nature. We believe that because the streetscape results were very mixed, that were 7 out of 19 lots for an attached garage with another 7 lots that have a detached garage that's visible from the street, that's very much within the pattern of the neighborhood. And using, so that this is a very minor change to the streetscape character analysis. And the front yard setback itself is small at 0.74 meters difference between the required and the proposed. And because we have a further 4 to 5 meter, 3.93 to 4.5 meter setback from the sidewalk, from the property line, that this creates a result of a very large apparent setback, where the garage and the addition actually are further back from the street than the main house. So they have the appearance of receding from the front face of the house. We have consulted with the community association, the councillor, and all of the adjacent neighbors. You have 2 letters of support from them, and the 3rd most affected neighbor at 1 Ridgeway has had extensive discussions, and although they haven't submitted a letter of support, have expressed their satisfaction with the plan. So we believe that we've worked really hard to try to factor in a huge range on a difficult lot to allow a family that's lived in the neighborhood for a long time to have a good place to keep their car out of sight, a good place to house their bicycles, and a room for each one of their kids, and potential to work from home so that they can continue to live in a neighborhood that supports the intensification and living within in areas where you can commute and you have services. The alternative which would be to move to the suburbs, or spend a huge amount more for a home in order to get the basic facilities that they need to continue living here.
All right. And one thing I forgot to ask you at the beginning of this is, how is the home non-complying?
The existing home, perhaps if you could go to the site plan again, which if you put on the side, I can identify which slide that is. So you can see there's a setback line near the bottom of the page, parallel to the rear yard setback, that cuts through the deck, so that the front of the house is basically compliant, other than the one corner near the existing, where it says near where it says existing two-story brick and siding dwelling. The rear portion of the house projects beyond the required rear yard setback at in the kitchen area, and you can see a bathroom and back door. And then we've designed the new part so that it is compliant or further setback from the rear yard of the new portion.
So this house was built long before 1964.
Yes, this house was built in 1920, and very interestingly, it was part of the Linden Lee suburb, and it had a whole different point of view of staggering houses, building very small houses, favoring communal space over private space, and actually had planned for a communal parking garage because people didn't have cars at the time and they didn't envision the need for cars, so that there would have been which was never built, a communal parking garage on the property.
No, it never did turn into a garden city, did it?
No, it turned out well. I think people love to live there, but yes, 1920 and 2020 are very different times.
One of the few examples of Mr. Howard's way of developing land anywhere in Canada. Anyway, okay, all right. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. No questions from the panel. I see that Ms. Beaubien has raised her hand. Maybe she's not there.
Just a minute, I'll bring her back in.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And my name is Marnie Beaubien, and I live on Kenwood. I just wanted to say bravo to Ms. Thompson, because I've sat in a lot of these committee meetings, and just to present a plan where you're keeping distinctive trees that are in the way and taking light into consideration and neighbors' gardens. It's really exciting to see that. So I just want to say bravo for putting an odd thing together to make it work. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Beaubien. To the members of the panel, do we wish to reserve on this and speak about this in an after meeting? Okay. All right, you have before you an application, 2 variances. Permit a front-facing attached garage, whereas bylaw based on the streetscape character analysis does not permit a front-facing garage. Are we in support of that variance? Okay, and variance B, the reduction in the front yard setback to 1.52 meters, I think has been adequately explained by Ms. Thompson, that this house is well set back from the sidewalk. and that this really wasn't something that, well, I understand why the city is making its comments, but I don't think it's going to have any particular impact, for me anyway, on the abutting neighbors. All in favor of variance B? All right, Ms. Thompson, your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. The next application on the agenda is item 3, 432 Avondale, to permit front-facing garages and reduced interior side yards for 2 single detached dwellings. And I believe Ms. Daou is the agent for the applicant.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Ms. Daou, before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I affirm that to be true.
Okay, so we are back again with this project. What's changed from the last time we dealt with it?
Yeah, so I think we should bring up the slides and then I can go through the proposed changes since the last time. In particular, I'll skip through the context because it was quite recently that we've addressed the application.
Yeah.
So we'll just go actually straight to some renderings and then to the site plan. So this slide here. Oh, sorry, one back. Okay, so as you're aware, an application for combined consents and minor variances for this subject site was presented to the committee on May 4th. The original application was for the combined consents as well as minor variances to permit a reduced lot width of 9.01 meters, a reduced interior side yard setback of 0.6 meters between the 2 proposed new dwellings, as well as to permit a front-facing attached garage, whereas that is not the dominant characteristic as determined through a streetscape character analysis. So through discussions and feedback and comments received from the committee, the project team did some fairly extensive review of options moving forward. As you're aware, the severances for the application were approved. However, the variances for the reduced lot width between at 0.6 meters between the new dwellings, as well as the front-facing attached garages, were refused. The 9.0, sorry if I didn't mention this, the 9.01 meter reduced lot width was also approved. So the severances are granted. There has been no movement in terms of fulfillment of the provisional conditions, and the minor variance to permit the reduced lot width to accommodate 2 single detached dwellings was also approved. Again, based on the feedback that we collected from just the general questions and the decision of the committee, as well as the comments provided by staff, we went back to staff and proposed some updated plans. The update would be to propose new interior side yard setbacks of 1.2 meters across all yards evenly. So this has the effect of requiring variances for the 2 exterior lot lines adjacent to the adjacent properties to the east and west. But it creates a more evenly distributed side yard condition across all of the properties and more comparable and sympathetic to others in the community that have similar side yard conditions. This also has the benefit of removing the need for any easements for right-of-way and access between the 2 parcels. So that will no longer be a requirement. The 2 properties would be able to function independently in terms of access and maintenance. The design also has further recessed the garage facade from the exterior facade of the building as well to help to soften that massing. So with those proposed changes, we feel that this is a much more proportionate design. It's much more sympathetic to other existing conditions along Avondale in particular, and many examples of new developments that have recently been approved and constructed for single detached dwellings with attached front-facing garages and more similar conditions to the 1.2 meter proposed side yard setback. Just on this point, I will mention as well, the owners through the original iteration of the design had consulted quite extensively with the community They had received 9 letters of support for that proposal with the 0.6 meter side yard condition. And then for the updated design, they went back to their immediately adjacent neighboring properties to the east and west just to discuss the proposed rationale and the 1.2 meter side yard setback reduction, because that would be now implemented and they would be the most likely to be impacted by that reduction. And they did receive 2 letters of support from those immediately adjacent neighbors. As well, throughout the process, we have been consulting fairly extensively with the Westboro Community Association, who had provided their support for the application as well.
Yes, we note that. We have their letter on file.
Great. So that's in a nutshell. I can go through the remainder of the presentation if the committee wishes as well, and I'm more than happy to do so. We have the full presentation package ready.
Okay. You're aware of the zoning provisions that were put in place for Westboro?
Yes, we are aware of those zoning provisions.
And the 1.5 meter side yard was one of those provisions that changed in Westboro. So why can't you meet the 1.5 meter side yard requirement?
Yeah, so
this is new construction, by the way.
Yes, correct. So this is new construction. The 1.5 meter interior side yard setback requirement was established, from my understanding of reviewing the staff reports and reviewing the planning reports for that revision. It was established to create a consistent side yard setback that would apply to larger apartment type dwelling units that would now be permitted through the rezoning, the R4 UA rezoning provisions. So creating a consistent yard setback between those types of developments, which are much larger, much more onerous in terms of their requirements for maintenance and access equipments to the rear yard, and a significantly larger building massing. And the yard conditions proposed would have the same effect on single detached, semi-detached dwellings. So it would create that consistent footprint throughout. The reason for the required reduction is to permit a fully functional living space for a larger family. On the main level, if restricting this to comply fully with the 1.5 meter side yard setbacks, it creates a floor plate that just does not function properly in terms of circulation. And then on the upper level, where the bedrooms, the owners require 4 bedrooms for their family. They're going to be living in one of the homes. And to provide 4 bedrooms at a 1.5 meter interior side yard setback, it would squeeze the bedrooms in to be only 7 feet wide. For a little bit of context, a typical queen size bed would be 6'8" long. So that really just restricts the ability for the owners to have enough bedrooms to support their family. I can have the architect speak to that further, Justin Seguin, if he would like. But I also think it would be important to draw your attention to some design articulations that have been integrated into the proposal. I'm just going to check my slide numbering so the committee coordinators can skip to that. So that would be on slide 8, please. Oh, your slide numbering is different than mine. Sorry. Yeah, it would be the one just above the slide that you're currently on, showing the articulations. It's that slide there. Perfect. Thank you. So again, though we're requesting the interior side yard setback reductions on either side, the intent of this is not to fully maximize the floor plate of the building. The owners are integrating some interesting features along the interior building walls to create articulations and added privacy and buffering between the properties. So they have these 2 highlighted features along the exterior walls, which introduce some additional step backs and setbacks from the neighboring properties to the east and west. And these are on the most exterior walls, not the walls in between the buildings. But these articulations will serve to provide that additional buffering, additional light and air filtration, and demonstrate that the intent, again, is not to fully maximize the floor plate, rather create a top level that has bedrooms that work and function well for the family, and also to create an interesting floor plan that on the main level that just really responds to their needs and to a growing family's needs. This property is immediately adjacent to the Dovercourt Recreation Center, so it is anticipated that it would be a prime location for a larger family. The other additional second house that would be proposed, again, the owners are going to be living in one of these proposed dwellings.
And in response to the department's concerns regarding the front-facing garages?
Yeah, so we've reviewed the front-facing garage provision extensively, and I'll actually go to the next slide, please, because I think this highlights quite well. So this proposal is located on a block with multiple corner lots. Multiple corner lots with multiple street intersections. So we've got the street intersection of Cole Avenue, Roosevelt, and Golden to the east and west. When completing the streetscape character analysis, the results are quite close in terms of the amount of properties with front-facing attached garages already and the amount who do not. This property also already has a front-facing attached garage, so that property, the property itself, does not contribute to the calculations of the streetscape character analysis. So the introduction with these two new proposed dwellings actually only introduces one new garage to the streetscape in total. The way that the streetscape character analysis review must be done as well is that the corner lot at Cole Avenue and at Roosevelt Avenue, they each actually do have front-facing attached garages. The issue is that the attached garages face the corner side lot lines as opposed to Avondale. That said, it still contributes to the overall streetscape condition of Avondale in general. If you were to extend the streetscape character analysis review study area just 2 blocks to the east and west, the results would overwhelmingly support the provision of front-facing attached garages. And that ratio is at 21 to 12. And that's just by extending 2 blocks, not considering further up the street or to the east and west along Avondale. So though it's not a permitted situation on this site, because of the overall results of the streetscape character analysis, it's pretty obvious when you visit the street, you take a look at the streetscape, you look at the new construction that's being proposed. There's many other cases of actual double garages that have been introduced on the property as well, and those don't count towards additional garages to the streetscape counts, though they do present as such when you're looking at the streetscape. So when you factor in all these different conditions, the actual character of the streetscape would overwhelmingly support the provision of garages. Another important thing I think to factor in is this is a family-sized unit. It's intended to be family owned and lived in property. And a garage is just a necessity of having a family. You have bicycles to store on property. You have your lawn and maintenance equipment, your garbage storage. So all of these things do have to be stored somewhere. And we think it's significantly more favorable to store those in an enclosed space with an enclosed parking space than it would be to provide the example of the permitted cantilever design, which would have all of those different components that are necessary for a family exposed to the elements. It's a Canadian winter city, so just in terms of snow maintenance and storage, that would be a challenge as well. And this is just an ultimately better use of the rear yard area and the soft landscaping space, as opposed to providing a laneway all along the interior side lot lines leading to a rear located garage. The driveways are permitted per the streetscape character analysis. So again, it's just the actual front-facing attached garage.
Okay, I think Mr. Wilder had a question or comment. Mr. Wilder.
Yes, thank you. Do you have an actual photo of the streetscape, not conceptual, but did you actually put together a photo of the streetscape?
Yes, so I will. Yes, absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll ask the committee coordinators to bring up the 3rd slide in this presentation, and it's titled Surrounding Context and Streetscape Character.
So what you have next to you on at 436, that's 1/2 of a semi, right? Next door.
Correct. Yes.
And what is the side yard there between your property? Like what's the distance there now on that side yard for 436? Do you know?
So the distance, I'm just pulling up the survey right now. The distance between the building and the side yard would be 3.26 meters. And that is not measured to a slight projection that's showing it might be a chimney on the survey, but that was not measured to that. And then there is a garage in the rear yard, which I would estimate, it's not dimensioned on the survey. It looks to be under 1 meter away from the property line. The garage in the rear yard.
That's 3.6 to the property line. Is that correct? Or to the, yeah. So in other words,
That's correct, yes.
So, you know, you're asking for, and then I guess at 424, the owner has written in the support of your application, that's a single home. You know, without a doubt, I imagine there'll be an application before us. It's one of the last remaining singles there, to do a duplicate, literally to replicate basically what you're doing on your lot with 2 singles at 424. I'm sure the owner, if he's even watching and is concerned about this particular one, will be doing almost the exact same thing, asking us for the 1.2 side yards for 2 singles, I imagine, in due course. I don't know, I guess, what is going to be the, you talk about the size, it's going to be a 4-bedroom. So I'm assuming this is about what, 2,000 to 2,500 square feet each single?
That's correct. Through you, Mr. Chair, the square footage would be 2,500 square feet, which is reduced from the previous iteration of the plans.
All right, thank you for that. That's my questions for now.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilder. Ms. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just you're introducing a depressed or a sloped driveway. Are there any other sloped driveways on this block of Avondale, and what is that slope?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe there are other examples of sloped driveways in this particular area, but it is introduced in response to the site grading conditions, and in order to lower the roof line lower than the permitted under the zoning bylaw. I will ask that Justin speak to the question regarding the slope percentage.
Mr. Sagan?
Hi, yeah, no problem. Happy to speak to that. So the slope is at a 6% slope. So that's the, it's a slope that conforms with building code so that there's no heating in the driveway required. It's also a very marginal slope in the grand scheme of things, so that there's no, you know, it doesn't make the driveway a dangerous element in any way. And it's also something that we've done great due diligence with the city and infrastructure on to make sure that they would confirm that they are okay with the reverse slope driveway on the property, and they have confirmed such.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, any other questions from the panel members? I don't believe we have. Do the applicants still wish to speak to this application or not? I have them on the speakers list.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I am the applicant, but the owners, I think, are fine with proceeding without speaking unless they decide otherwise. Then.
Okay. All right, and to the 4 tests, Ms. Dawu, briefly.
Sure, yes. So I'll just go through the 4 tests quickly. This is a minor application. The proposed updated 1.2 meter side yard setback along each lot line contributes to consistency in built form and establishes a proportionate building envelope that does work well in this neighborhood. This iteration of the interior side yard setback variance reduces the building footprint compared to the previous iteration, as we've discussed, and it creates additional space in between the 2 buildings so they can function independently, and buffering between the roof lines and the eave projections. And it also allows for the cut-in elements that will contribute to additional privacy and buffering between the neighbors. Again, as we've gone through, this variance is required to support a more livable floor plate for the owners and create a family-sized ground-oriented development. And without these variances, without this variance for the interior side yard setback reduction, the top level would be very challenging to function well and appropriately with the 4 bedrooms that are required for this family. In terms of the front-facing attached garage, which is variances B and D, the variance to permit a front-facing attached garage is minor in this case. Again, as mentioned, this home already does feature an attached front-facing garage, so the proposal will only add 1 additional garage to this streetscape. The streetscape character analysis results do not consider the corner front-facing lots, which do have front-facing attached garages, nor does it consider the double attached front-facing garages that are along the streetscape, and there are at least 3 examples of those. Again, if the review area were to be extended, it would be overwhelmingly supportive to have a front-facing attached garage on this property as opposed to not. And then design elements have been introduced in order to conceal the garage further and mitigate any visual impacts from the garage, including a bay window projection that projects an additional 0.6 meters over the garage element, front principal entrance canopy that extends further than the front facing garage, as well as steps to the principal entrance, and the depressed recessed driveway, which allows it to be further concealed from the street, and the introduction of high quality materials will also help to further soften that massing effect. In terms of if the proposal meets the intent and purpose of the official plan, the proposed development conforms with both the existing and new official plans by providing for a gentle intensification that's quite compatible from a design perspective, while complying with all but 2 of the required zoning provisions. This development introduces ground-oriented family-sized units while protecting street trees. And there is a city-owned distinctive street tree in the front that will be protected and preserved, and the introduction of additional soft landscaping, flower beds, and soft landscaping in the rear yard. Being so close to the Dover Cart Recreation Center to the south, this is an excellent location for family-oriented homes, contributing to healthy and livable communities. In terms of whether the application meets the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, the intent and purpose of the interior side yard setback, and I did touch on this, it's to ensure that in the Westboro development overlay, multi-unit apartment buildings and single detached dwellings have consistent side yard setbacks throughout the development overlay to provide separation, access to the rear yards for waste management, maintenance, and so forth. This design responds to the access and separation needs that are appropriate for a single detached dwelling in the urban area, which is much less onerous than what would be required if this were to be a larger massing through a low-rise apartment building. And again, many other examples in this neighborhood have a 1.2 meter interior side yard setback, some of which have been recently developed. This does contribute to consistency in built form and development pattern along the streetscape, with the 0.3 meter reduction on either side being negligible. The intent and purpose of the front-facing attached garage provisions is to ensure that parking and vehicles do not dominate the streetscape, that prominence is on the front facade, soft landscaping, and trees. Again, the city-owned street tree, it's a maple in the front, will be retained, and then there will be significant aggregated soft landscaping that exceeds zoning requirements in both the front and rear yards. The garage also serves to conceal the parking space, with it being further recessed from the front facade. It will not be the dominant feature of the front of the home, and the dominant feature will not be parking. Again, the intent of the streetscape character analysis is to ensure that new development reflects the neighborhood character. In this case, as we've gone through, if the study area were to be extended to include properties to the east and west in the blocks immediately to the east and west, the results would overwhelmingly be in favor of attached front-facing garages, and that ratio again is 21:12. So though it does not comply to the streetscape character analysis results, the overall neighborhood character does in fact feature front-facing attached garages. So again, with the design elements introduced and given the overall streetscape character, the intent of the zoning bylaw is being met. And we're landing on the last slide here, which is already on the screen. Again, so the variances facilitate the appropriate and very gentle intensification of this site with a ground-oriented, family-sized development. And the variances and proposed dwellings are an appropriate size and scale for the community and are required to establish a livable floor plate for a family home. The neighborhood, again, features many examples of newer construction with these same type of conditions, and the proposal as amended fits and functions well in this context. Given these factors, the requested variances meet the 4 tests under Section 45 of the Planning Act and do represent good land use planning.
Thank you, Ms. Daou. Mr. Wilder, do you want to reserve on this? You had some misgivings about this application, or are we?
No, I'm okay with this. I'll reluctantly support this application, Mr. Chair, very reluctantly.
All right. So regarding, thank you, Ms. Daou, for your input, and Mr. Seguin. So regarding this application to permit front-facing garages and reduced interior side yards for 2 single-detached dwellings at 432 Avondale Avenue. All in favor of the application? Your application's approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye. That's that. All right. Next application we'll deal with is 502 Melbourne Avenue. And this is to permit an increased building depth from the front line for a detached dwelling. And the agent for the applicant is Mr. Kelly. Is he there?
Hello, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Kelly, your
Hoping
address
my
for
voice
the
sounds normal.
your address for the record, please.
It's 240 Michael Copeland Drive, Suite 20.
Yeah.
In Ottawa.
Before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do swear.
Okay. So we understand that this house has been built and there's an issue with the depth from the front to the rear exceeding what is allowed in the bylaw.
That is correct.
Am I correct? And I think in your report, you have made the comment or made the statement that a building permit was issued in error. How did that happen,
correct.
Mr. Kelly?
On November 3rd, 2021.
And all right, and Ms. Linker is with the city. Ms. Linker, could you confirm that this building permit was issued in error?
Yes, the zoning deficiency was not caught in the zoning examination during the review of the building permit, and it was brought to the owner's attention when they were recently applying for a building permit to develop 500 Melbourne lot, which from my understanding had a very similar building footprint. I'll note that the building permit was issued around the same time that the bylaw was created. So I'm not sure if the Westboro overlay showed up in Geo Ottawa at the time of the building permit application, but it's staff's opinion that the applicant is doing the right thing by getting this variance now.
So this was missed by staff, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes, in building code services.
Okay. All right. So very, very briefly, Mr. Kelly.
Would you just like me to go through the 4 tests, Mr. Chair?
Just tell us exactly what you want.
For sure. So if you can bring up the presentation, please.
Yep.
Let's see. If you could skip through, please, to slide.
Yeah, I think a site plan would be more than adequate.
Sure. So slide 6 just discusses the variance. So the requested variance is to permit an increase of the maximum permitted building depth from the front lot line to 25.9 meters, whereas provisions of the bylaw require that no part of a building may be located further away than 24 meters from the front lot line.
Okay. And with that 25.9 meter envelope depth, how much of the rear yard depth is remaining?
41%, and I'll just get you the number. It's 16.6 meters. So 41% of the depth of the lot.
There's still a significant yard depth even with this extension of the house past the bylaw requirement.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any questions from the members on this application? All in favor of granting the application as received? Your application is received.
We do have a speaker. We have a speaker.
Oh, do we? Oh, Miss
Beaubien.
Miss Beaubien. Sorry. Ms. Beaubien wants to speak to this. All right, Ms. Beaubien, please please. I didn't look at my sheet.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I was unmuted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Marnie Beaubien and I live at 394 Kenwood, and I made my request to speak a few days ago. So my first question is to Mr. Chown at Novatech, it works in the area all the time, probably knows Westboro better than anyone. So recognizing that a building permit was wrongly given, in your plans, wouldn't you have known that 24 meters was the new bylaw?
I think we've heard that the mistake on this was made at the staff level, Ms. Beaubien.
But I'm just saying, in the submission, they know all the bylaws. I've sat through all these meetings. They know every little intricacy, so it surprises me.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, for the record, we would have had nothing to do with the filing of the building permit application.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of the building, it's fine to look at. I look at it every day, and I don't have any concerns about the length at this point. But I do have a concern for the next building that will go in. It's a severed lot, so typically it's a matching building, and it would be really upsetting to me if it was now a precedent that the new building going in could be also 25.9 meters.
I don't think that precedent's established. The bylaw is the bylaw.
And I can assure the committee that our client has amended the building permit application for the property at 500 Melbourne, so it fully conforms.
Okay.
I have a distinctive tree that's at the edge, so that's my concern. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we also had a Mr. Coolidge from 360 Kenwood Avenue who wished to speak as well. He's on the list anyway.
I don't see him on the call, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
If he wants to raise his hand, I'll bring him in. I don't see him, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay. So apologies to Ms. Beaubien, and again to the members of the committee as far as this variance to allow the slight extension of the dwelling past the bylaw required maximum. All in favor? Application's approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Ooh. Next applications on the agenda are items 5 and 6, 457 Dawson Avenue. And these are applications to sever the property into two parcels to construct a semi-detached dwelling with reduced lot area, rear yard, and a front-facing garage. The agent for the applicant, again, this is Miss McQuaig and Mr. Sewer.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi. Who's going to take the oath?
Mr. Sewer.
Okay. Mr. Sewer, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I swear.
Okay, so briefly, please.
Sure. So I think we have slides as well. If you could put those up.
And
Right,
before you start, this is a through lot between Dawson Avenue and Kirkwood. Do you meet all the zoning requirements regarding a through lot?
Yes, we do. So so the through lot requires the front yard setback to be applied to the rear yard. We meet that. And we also meet the rear yard area requirement as well.
Yeah, that's how you build bigger houses on lots.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, my name is Arjun Soor once again, and I will be presenting the application for 457 Dawson Avenue.
Yeah.
And as you see, Christine McQuaig, my colleague, is also on the call as well.
All right.
So before we begin, I would like to note that variances B and E for reduced rear yard areas were removed based on confirmation from city staff that they would not be required. Is there a function of the rear yard setback, which is not applicable on this site, it being a through lot?
Yeah, so
next slide, please.
A, C, D, and F still stand.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So the subject property is a through lot, as I mentioned before, located on the east side of Dawson Avenue in Westboro. Next slide, please. The property is designated general urban area in the current official plan and minor corridor within the inner urban transect in the new official plan. It's also part of the evolving overlay in the new OP, and the property is zoned R2G residential second density zone subzone G. Next slide, please. So subject site has an area of 436.7 square meters, a frontage of 15.24 meters on Dawson Avenue, and a depth of approximately 28.64 meters as well. Next slide, please. So these are just some images of the site. We can go to the next slide. And so the proposed development is to sever the existing lot to construct a 2-story semi-detached dwelling. Each unit would contain a front-facing attached garage and results in a net increase of 1 dwelling unit on the property. The proposed dwelling will be constructed from panel siding, metal and brick masonry with plentiful glazing, and meets all applicable setback requirements. The proposal is also designed to retain the existing streetscape tree. Next slide, please. So this image just shows the proposed site plan with the front, interior, and rear yard setbacks shown in the table above. Next slide, please. And these are just the building elevations. We can go to the next slide.
Oh, crap.
So the requested severance is to sever the existing lot with a frontage of 15.24 meters and an area of 436.7 square meters into 2 new lots, each with a frontage of 7.62 meters and a lot area of 218.4 square meters. And I'll remind you, as per changes to the Planning Act, no reciprocal severances were required or submitted. Next slide, please. So the requested variances for both Part 1 and Part 2 are to permit a reduced lot area of 218.4 square meters, whereas 225 square meters is required, and to permit front-facing attached garages, where no such garage is permitted according to the streetscape character analysis. Next slide, please. So I'll now move into discussing the 4 tests, beginning with whether the variances are considered minor. So the proposed lot area is considered minor, as the reduction of 6.6 square meters is very slight and has a negligible impact on the amount of space provided on the lot. Additionally, the reduced lot area is simply a product of shallower lot depths that are characteristic of all the lots along Dawson Avenue, and the proposed dwelling is still appropriately scaled to the lot regardless. And as you see on the image to the right, the red outline indicates similarly sized lots to the ones being proposed, and these red lots all have the same width as the ones outlined in blue, but they have slightly reduced lot areas thanks to the shallower lot depths of the through lots along Dawson Avenue. Next slide, please. So the proposed front-facing attached garage is also considered minor, as the overall massing and design of the dwelling is intended to reduce emphasis on the garages. Extensive glazing on the front facade, including on the garage, helps to create a sense of transparency and reduce the appearance of the garage. Paired front entrances and the garage offsets also serve to emphasize the rest of the house and front soft landscaping. Front-facing garages are also fairly common throughout the area, including in areas not within the scope of the streetscape character analysis, as you see on the image to the right, which shows some of the properties nearby that have front-facing attached garages, including the immediately abutting neighbors to the south. Front-facing attached garages are also a superior design choice and are functionally better than the permitted cantilever option, which you can see on the bottom right image on this slide, where the vehicle there is actually a little bit more visible and items stored under the cantilever can be seen. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a side-by-side comparison of the proposed attached garage versus the permitted cantilever option. So as you can see, the attached garage is better integrated into the overall design of the houses, allows the vehicle to be enclosed and not visible from the street, allows residents to store their refuse containers and household items, and concentrates the visual mass towards the center, which helps emphasize the rest of the house. The cantilever option, on the other hand, has an asymmetrical design and proportions. It ensures that a vehicle is always visible from the street, that it impacts the character of the street, and offers less functional household item storage with refuse containers and garbage constantly visible from the street. And it's worth noting as well that the garage option on the left is one that's supported by neighboring residents. Next slide, please. So it should also be noted that though front-facing attached garages are fairly common in the neighborhood, approval of the proposed development won't significantly alter the future streetscape character analyses on Dawson Avenue. So the top image there shows the existing streetscape character analysis with 15 properties not having attached garages and 6 properties having attached garages. The dominant character group here is A. And if the development were approved, the image below shows a sample streetscape character analysis if the property across the street were theoretically redeveloped. And the dominant character area group is still A, as 13 properties would not have attached garages and 8 properties would have attached garages. So the proposal therefore doesn't actually alter or tip the scales of the dominant character group for attached garages and carports. Next slide, please. I'd also like to highlight that throughout the application process, the property owner engaged in consultation with neighbors, which included speaking with residents to explain the proposal and dropping off a letter which explained the redevelopment and the required variances. Of the 12 residents that they consulted, 2 sent signed letters of support, 4 provided verbal support, and 6 did not respond. It's notable here that the 3 properties who are most likely to be impacted by the proposal and would have to look at it every day from across the street are the ones who actually supported the proposal with the attached garages. So I think based on this, the variance is considered minor. So we go to the next slide, please. So the variances also meet the intent of the OP to accommodate a mix of residential dwelling types and support increased density to meet housing targets by adding a semi-detached dwelling to the area, which doubles the density on the site while retaining compatible ground-oriented built form. It also supports the transition towards 15-minute communities by increasing residential densities to support active and public transportation use. Next slide, please. The proposal also meets the intent of the minimum lot area provision to appropriately accommodate development and sufficient landscaping by being appropriately scaled to the lot. The variance is also relatively technical in nature, as the reduced lot area is simply a product of shallower lot depths along Dawson Avenue. Next slide, please. So the proposal also meets the intent of the streetscape character analysis to ensure that new developments demonstrate good urban design and don't adversely impact the streetscape. The semi-detached dwelling is designed to emphasize the rest of the house and landscaping, not the garage. Materials and glazing create a seamless design, and the proposal is functionally and aesthetically better than the permitted cantilever option, as the cantilever always will show a parked vehicle. Subject site also abuts another semi-detached dwelling with front-facing attached garages, and there are other such dwellings further south on Dawson Avenue, which ensures that the proposal fits within the immediate street context. Lastly, the proposal also retains front yard soft landscaping and the streetscape tree, which ensures that the trees will continue to benefit the streetscape. Next slide, please. So lastly, the proposed development with requested variances is considered a suitable and desirable use of land, as it provides additional housing through intensification and provides increased density while retaining a compatible, context-sensitive, ground-oriented built form. The proposal also aligns with the PPS, both official plans, and the intent of the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So based on this, it is opinion of Q9 Planning and Design that the proposed severance and minor variances constitute good land use planning. And next slide, please. So we'll now be available to take any questions or comments.
Did I miss something, or did you not give us the rationale for the consents?
The rationale for the consents would be included in the report itself. I mean, there's a lot of criteria to go through, so I thought just for the sake of time, going through the consents would not be a best use of committee. So I'm going to
I'll tell you something. We're about to change our decision language regarding consents, and they're going to specifically reference the 3 requirements for consents in our decisions. Okay. So, to make it brief, is the proposal consistent with the provincial policy statement 2020?
Yep, I believe it is, and we've demonstrated that in our rationale.
And number 2, rationale is the plan of subdivision is not needed for the proper and orderly development of the municipality.
No, it is not.
No. And 3, the proposal has adequate regard for subdivision criteria in section 5124 of the Planning Act.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. And we're going to be asking for this on a regular basis whenever there's a consent application, that the rationale for consent is going to have to be in your materials.
Noted, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sir. There are a number of conditions that the staff have no issues, as you know, with the lot area variance. Staff are not in support of the front-facing garages, obviously because of the streetscape character analysis. Ms. Linker, just briefly on the department's opposition to the front-facing garages.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you said, staff have concerns with the proposed variance of the front-facing garage, as we're of the opinion that it deviates from the intent of the streetscape character analysis provisions. And this is an objective count of the building elements on site, and they are intended to encourage development to maintain the character with the existing homes on the street. So we believe that the variance deviates from the intent of the official plan and bylaw with respect.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Linker. Regarding conditions, just to go over them so we haven't missed any tree protection and mitigation measures. Services capped outside critical root zone. A tree planting plan is required. Securities for a period of 3 years for tree number 1 as identified on the site plan. Cash and live parkland is required. An existing dwelling removed and services capped. Servicing plan, grading and drainage plan, accessory structure removed or relocated. Asphalt overlay requirements, joint use and maintenance agreement, and because of its location, a noise attenuation study is also required. So we haven't missed anything on this. Okay.
We've reviewed the conditions extensively and even discussed some of the conditions with staff already, and we have no concerns with the conditions as presented.
Okay, thanks. Ms. McLean, you had a question.
Just wondered if there was any consideration given to bringing parking in off of Kirkwood, the other street. Would that be your rear yard? And then is that then allowed to have your garages back there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have discussed that, and it's my understanding and recommendation that staff does not want road cuts off of Kirkwood, and it would be the preference to remove those accesses off of Kirkwood and have them face Dawson. There is the current access is off of Kirkwood, and it's a preferable position to and safer for the residents to have it off of Dawson instead of off of Kirkwood.
So city staff don't want accesses off of Kirkwood, and they don't want you to put your garages at the front on Dawson. Is that what I'm hearing?
Essentially, yes, that would be the situation, simply because Dawson is affected by its set of streetscape character analysis condition. Access is not prohibited from Kirkwood, it's just less desirable from a traffic management perspective.
So does city planning staff, I guess, the alternative, if you don't want front facing garages, would to be put garages in the rear yard off of Kirkwood, and is that supportable, I guess, to city planning?
Ms. Linker.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. Staff agree that creating driveways and access points off of Kirkwood would not be desirable in this context. It would be desirable for access to be off of the side street, off of Dawson. It would not be recommended by city staff to have attached garages off of Dawson, as this is not the dominant character given by the streetscape character analysis.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the members of the panel? Anyone wish to reserve on this application, or shall we vote on it now? All right. So in the matter of 457 Dawson Avenue, 2 variances to permit reduced lot area and to permit front-facing attached garage, and 459 Dawson Avenue to permit reduced lot area and to permit a front-facing attached garage. All in favor of the application? Your application is unanimously approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Chair.
very much. Thank you very much.
All right. The next application we'll deal with today is 14 Stevens, and this was, I believe, a sine die application from December the 8th of last year. And Ms. Smith, I believe, is the agent for this application.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair and committee members.
And before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies?
Yes, I do.
For the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so this is back before us again.
It was adjourned because of we hadn't gone through enough steps in the site plan control process.
Okay, so where are we today on this application, Ms. Smith?
We've received our third round of comments, and the only comments left are engineering comments.
So your site plan is essentially approved?
As far as our design is going, yes.
Okay. All right. All right, if you'd like to make a presentation on this, on your application for variance.
Yes, thank you. We could have the slides.
And I take it forestry's happy now?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
We responded quickly, and they have a revised landscape site plan.
Okay.
So this property is a perfect location for a low-rise 8-unit apartment building with the majority of units having 2 bedrooms. Next slide, please. With the river and higher density developments on the west side, there's a transition to the lower density on the east. The requested variances are needed to realize the potential of this site. The project passes the 4 tests and is an opportunity for creative homes in a walkable community. Next slide, please. The proposed building easily connects to the cycling network. It's less than a 5-minute walk to Loblaws, the Rideau Sports Center, and the Adaway Crossing Bridge leading to downtown. Next slide, please. Within the R4 UC zone, we see many low-rise residential buildings. There are higher density zones to the northwest, such as the R5D zone with a height limit of 25 meters, and there's a TM zone to the northeast. Next slide, please. The siting lines up with the existing buildings, creating a harmonious streetscape. Note that the larger building on the west goes past the rear yards. On the east, behind the neighboring building, is parking. The neighboring buildings do not encourage an inviting rear yard. But our plan is to make the amenity space in the rear yard as inviting as possible. Next slide, please. This is looking south during the construction of the neighboring buildings on the east. The river and the larger buildings are on the right. Next slide, please. It's looking west towards the river, showing the R5 buildings and the larger low-rise buildings in the R4 zone. Next slide, please. These are views of the existing building. Note the trees in the front of the property, which will remain. The existing detached house is confined between the 2 newly developed 3-unit buildings on the east side and the 4-story apartment building on its west side. Next slide, please. In order to fit well with the existing context, the proposed building will follow the precedent massing of the neighboring low-rise apartment buildings, as well as their materials palette. Walkways leading to shared porches will create a community vibe, as well as providing extra space to treat the street frontage with soft landscaping and a pedestrian-friendly and welcoming front yard. Next slide, please. Next slide. Hello? Can you hear me?
It's freezing a bit, yeah.
It's not my computer, is it?
I don't believe so.
Phew.
Okay.
It was not a PowerPoint presentation, but
That's okay. These things happen from time to time. Not often, but definitely from time to time.
we should be at the 10th, number 10, I guess.
Go.
Further down, yeah. It's our drawing, it's our site plan I'm looking for. Next, further down. That one, yes. Oh, it's your number 12. Oh, that's it. Yes, thank you. Great. So
All right.
ah, there we are. Thank you. So please note the outline in red. As of right, the building could have been pulled forward so it's 4.5 meters from the front property line, which would only leave a 0.56 rear yard variance that we would be requesting. By moving the building back, the existing trees at the front are protected, and the building is compatible with its neighbors. The project has almost 10% more than the minimum required landscape area. More rear yard at this site is not as desirable as the front yard. Note that the building to the east are triplexes. They did not have to go through the site plan control processes. I'm just addressing the comment from one of the neighbors. They had less incentive to provide landscaping. Under our site plan control process, we won't get an occupancy permit or holdback release if the landscaping is not installed. If the proposed building was also a triplex, it would have the same mass, but be permitted a 1.2 meter setback. The increased size of a proposed building allows for desirable living spaces and interior stairs, permitting a variety of potential tenants. The proposal provides 2 visitor bike parking spaces on each side of the entrance stairs and 8 bicycle parking spaces in the rear yard. The area for the bike parking is sufficient at 1.2 meters. I don't have a car, and every day I walk my bike between parked cars that are much closer than 1.2 meters. Next slide, please.
If we could hold for 1 second. I think Ms. McLean had some questions regarding the side yards and the stairs and the steps.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so there's stairs and a landing that project right to the lot line. Then do the bikes have to go up the stairs, across the landing, and down the stairs to get to the back?
That's right, but we have a bike track installed in the stairs.
And I guess if the side yard requirement of 1.5 was met, it would give you a little, I guess I'm concerned about not having, if you took a wheelbarrow down there, if you wanted to get to the backyard to put a garden in or that, like, with the steps extending and the landing extending right to the lot line, you have an obstructed side yard there.
Mhm.
Anyway, it's just a comment. I just wondered how that.
Right. Well, I'll speak to the interior layouts. Right now, we have individual entrances to each apartment. So I'll get into that a bit later. But that was one of the highlights of this design. And also the larger space allows us to have 2 bedrooms in the apartments.
So just out of curiosity, those 4 sets of steps are the entrances to 4 of the units?
Yes. Do you want to go to our plans? I have the plans at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, go ahead. Or continue however you wish to present.
Okay, I'll just continue then. We'll get to it in a few slides.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so this talks about the landscape, because we have those landscape issues. The 2 existing silver maples at the front will be saved. Another tree will be added at the front. The overgrown Manitoba maples will be removed, and the 2 existing trees in the back, the honey locust and Norway maple, will be saved, and a maple will be planted at the back. Next slide, please. The stacked dwelling types articulate the front facade and create a transition between the R2 zone across the street. It also reflects the requirements of the R4 zoning bylaw. Stevens Avenue is a street presented with a lot of colors, shapes, and built forms. Mature trees are part of the street's character. The goal of the project is to create a pedestrian and bicycle-oriented community that complements the existing character and enhances the potential of the amenities in such a prime location. The proposed front porch functions as the main entrance to the front 4 units, as well as a place to rest, oversee street life, connect with the next door neighbors, and interact with passing pedestrians. The proposed balconies and bay windows break the mass of the building. Next slide, please. The color code allows the residents to associate their home when looking at the building from the outside. The articulation reflects the R4 study design guidelines, and the choice of material respects the existing use of bricks in the neighborhood. So these are like stacked dwelling type units, even though it's attached together as 8 units in one building. It's designed with separate entrance into each unit. It provides each tenant with a sense of ownership. It helps in reducing maintenance of snow clearance, because we don't have that typical exterior stairway at the back. It provides tenants with ownership and reduces the clutter if you have a shared main entrance hallway from neighboring tenants, and increases fire safety. Next slide, please. The entrance space in each unit is designed with a fair-sized closet to accommodate wall-hanging bicycle storage. We're thinking that if the intent is to encourage cycling, some of these tenants will have expensive bicycles. So it's designed into the project. So the rest, other than the front units having a balcony in the front, sorry, if you go to the next slide, please. You see that the balconies on the upper units, good sized balcony on the other units. Next slide, please. Okay, sorry, if you could go back. The concept of the 2-bedroom units make it a most suitable project for a broad range of Ottawa residents, and it suits young professionals and older or young couples and families. So the final slides show the neighboring property, which was currently and has been gravel, which is mainly parking at grade when these images were taken. Next, final slide. The side stairs are equipped with an integrated bike rail for easier access to the rear yard. The official plan supports infill development when it complements the character of the neighborhood and promotes long-term livability of the community. This project optimizes this location. It meets the 4 tests. The design is a carefully considered integration with landscape and neighbors. The Council and Community Association said that they find the variances are appropriate. Do you have any questions at this point?
Ms. McLean, anything further?
No, thank you.
Okay, before I finish, I would like to introduce the owner who would address the parking concerns of one of the neighbors. It's his name is Mohammed Abu Kaysen.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee.
Hi, could we have your address for the record, please?
1159 Klondike Road.
Okay, all right. Please proceed.
Okay, just to address our neighbor concern about the parking lot, I do not intend to have tenants with cars. My preference would be to have tenants who actually commute using their bikes. As a biker myself, originally to bring my own comfort with the design and the building, I have communicated with a company called Commune Auto in Ottawa, and I spoke to their CEO. They have 80 cars in Ottawa, and they are cars that it's like a car share program where you submit for a weekend need or what have you to see how much they have. They have 2 cars located at the park 400 meters away from my building. And I believe this is the verbal agreement at the time is to incorporate their service in the marketing material as we produce our rental advertising for our building. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Smith, you have 3 units that are accessible from the side yard?
4.
4? Okay.
Well, yes, 4
So,
from the front and 4 from the sides.
So on moving day, when couches and fridges and chairs and beds have to be brought into those units, is there going to be an issue with a 1.2 meter side yard? Not a lot of space.
Well, many stairwells are only 0.9 meters is the standard for a stairwell, an interior stair.
That's not the question I asked.
Well, okay, I'm sorry, but I'm just comparing it with other situations. So it's 0.9 versus 1.2. If we design a more conventional building, I guess I can say yes. I think it's adequate. Yeah.
Or Mr. Hamilton, I'm sure that the city staff looked at the design of this building. Are they comfortable with side entrances with a side yard this narrow?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. It was looked at by myself as well as development review through the site plan process. We don't have any concerns with it at this time.
Okay, so as far as you're concerned, there's adequate horizontal space.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Thank you, Ms. Smith. All right, Ms. Smith, to the 4 tests, very briefly, please.
Well, I tried to cover them throughout the presentation. We believe that there's basically 2 conditions that reduced rear yard affects the percentage of the landscaping at the back and the rear yard setback, which I think we demonstrated that we don't need rear yard amenity space as much as front yard in this situation. Okay. And then the side yard setbacks, again, there's the bike laneway is related to that side yard setback of 1.2 meters. And if it was a triplex, it would be the same volume and the same 1.2 meters if it was a triplex.
Mm-hmm. So as far as you're concerned, this application meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act?
Yes, yes.
All right. Any further questions from from the panel on this application? Ms. O'Sharon.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, you mentioned that one of the community associations had given their kind of endorsement of the project. I was wondering which community association that is and if they had any other feedback that was more specific than what you mentioned so far.
Perhaps my assistant Susanna can speak to that. Susanna?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is Susanna and I work for Susan Smith.
And your last name, please?
Keslerova, Keslerova.
And your address for the record, please.
It would be the office 941 Maryville Road.
Okay, please proceed.
I do believe it's Overbrook Community Association, and we contacted them fairly early in the process, and they found the requested variances appropriate, and so did the councillor's office.
So there's no objections to the local community association that I don't believe we have. We don't have a letter of objection in our files from Overbrook Community Association either. Okay. All right. So do we wish to reserve on this application or deal with or vote on it now?
Maybe reserve, Mr. Chair.
Pardon me?
Reserve, please, Mr. Chair.
All right. Ms. O'Sharon would prefer if we reserved on this application, so we shall. And you'll receive our decision in 10 days. Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And the next application on the agenda for 261 and 263 Cambridge Street North. Subdivide the applications to subdivide the property into two parcels for a long semi-detached dwelling with a reduced rear yard setback and an increased building height. And we note that there are changes to the public notice as per the planning department. Frontages for one lot reduced from 10.06 to 7.6 meters. And the area for E0083 is reduced from 127 square meters to 94.3 square meters. That's for 263 Cambridge. And for 261 Cambridge, we're looking at a 2.6 meter frontage instead of 2.4, and a 209.9 square meter area instead of 177.3. So those are changes that have been made in advance of this hearing. Now, Catherine Moore, I believe, is the agent for the applicant. Is she there?
Hi, Mr. Chair, I am here. I am the applicant, actually, not.
You're both.
Yeah, I'm both.
The applicant and the agent. That saves you money.
Yeah.
Before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do affirm this, yes.
Okay. If you'd like to provide us with a brief presentation, please.
Sure.
And we note that this was adjourned on the 6th of July, so it's back today.
Correct. We have provided some renderings to the committee. I don't know if those are available to show. Thank you. So currently this building is in rather a state of disrepair. It has been owned for many, many years by a landlord and inhabited by various tenants over the years. Those tenants have vacated the property as of now. We are homeowners on the street, slightly further up, just about half a block up on Cambridge Street North. And we have enjoyed living there for many years and have actually renovated a few other properties on the street. So we have a really good knowledge of sort of the culture and the environment and the neighbors that live in the area. Our children, when they were young, went to Devonshire Public School just down the street. So we quite like this little niche area in Centertown West. So what we would like to do here is take this property and put up 2 units, a long semi-detached building, being 261 and 263 Cambridge Street North. Each unit is not terribly huge, but it does provide 3-bedroom homes, plus a basement, plus some rooftop outdoor space. We're asking for 2 units in the vein of increasing the, responding to the increased density in the downtown core. We believe that although there won't be a lot of sort of backyard play space, if you will, the area such as McNabb Skate Park, McNabb Park, Cambridge Street School in front makes up for that nicely. Each unit is in keeping with the character on the street. We're making use of, some brick and some metal cladding. And we think that they are quite aesthetically pleasing. We're requesting 2 variances. One is with respect to the rear yard setback. So we do believe this is a minor variance that we're requesting, only by slightly over 1.25 meters of extra space. We assert that this is a minor request. The property behind 261 Cambridge is it backs onto Bronson, which I believe has Main Street zoning. And the space back there is currently used as, commercial parking and whatnot. As well, the extra projection into the backyard, the property to the north of us, their backyard space is all paved parking, and the property to the south of us already has an outbuilding back there. So we're not encroaching on anybody's private space. We do intend to maintain, there's a couple of nice trees in the back there. We do intend certainly to maintain those. So while there is sort of an encroachment on that rear yard setback, we feel that it is minor and, it will not have any negative impact on the properties around. We are requesting, the second variance we're requesting is to the total height of the building. We're requesting a variance of 0.5 meters to the overall midpoint of the slope. I should clarify that space actually only pertains to this, to a small area within the center of the building. So although there would be an additional 0.5 meters in height, from the ground, you would never actually know or see that this was the case. It will not cast a shadow on any of the adjacent buildings. And it, because the small rooftop terrace that's up there is also set back within the building code allowance, again, it doesn't infringe on anybody's privacy. I would also point out that the properties on Bronson behind us are currently building, well above us.
There's 6 stories.
6 stories directly behind us. So, our building will certainly still be quite dwarfed by anything else that's in the area. So we do, as we, in terms of responding to the 4 tests, as I've mentioned, we do feel that the variances that we're requesting are minor. We believe that the variances requesting are appropriate and in with keeping to the city plan. Overall, the site plan includes the addition of green space. We've consulted with the forestry department and will be taking quite extensive measures to protect the large maple that is in the front yard, which in this drawing, the maple is actually considerably larger than it is reflected in this drawing because we started this process a year ago and the tree has really grown in the last year even. We do, we assert that both of these properties will likely be family dwellings. There is space in the front. There's both deck space and enough green space in the front for sort of neighborly congregating and whatnot. And there is space in the back for parking, but more in keeping with, storing bicycles and that type of outdoor recreation equipment and whatnot.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
One of the main reason why we're asking for the variance to build higher is because we are presently sitting on bedrock, and rather than digging down and potentially disrupting the neighbor, or simply building on bedrock and not giving ourselves a full height foundation, we've opted to ask you guys for permission to build the building slightly higher, given, as Catherine said, given that the buildings around us are already towering over us. We figured that might be less disruptive for the neighbors in the building process. And it would make it more inviting for potential homeowners and families moving in to have a full foundation, a full-size basement rather than a mere crawl space for utility purposes. So that's really why we're asking to build higher.
All right. Is there a site plan in your presentation? I believe there was.
Yeah, I believe it's page in that presentation. It should be page 1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
Okay. So what are we looking at here?
So we are the space to the north, all of the green that's outlined here, we do intend to softscape. The space, the gray space, which is on the south side of the building, will be green pavers. So to access the parking, quote unquote, parking area in the back. There is enough space in the back for 2 parking spots. We don't intend to necessarily promote that as parking area. We're anticipating based on how well we know the neighborhood and the people who already live in that area, it's not an area that is typically where people have large cars or cars at all necessarily. So we hope to provide probably an electrical car
charging station.
Thank you. But otherwise, essentially, the backyard space will be promoted for sort of bicycle storage and recreation space.
Looking at those 2 parking spaces at the rear, have you undertaken a turning radius investigation to ensure that those parking spaces will actually work?
We agreed. We are skeptical that they will work. As I said, we aren't obligated to provide parking in this area, so in that case, the space will not be. The parking piece will be answered in the shared use agreement of the backyard. So we're expecting that if parking isn't manageable, then people won't use the space as parking.
And I'm looking at that right now, and you put 1 car parked there and another one trying to get in and out. That's going to be very, very tough. How long this space for the parking is the standard length? 5.2 meters.
It's the standard length of a parking spot, but bearing in mind that a car is not, a typical car probably is not going to be 5.2 meters long. So.
No, but if you're driving a Dodge Caravan, it's awfully close. We all don't drive smart cars. I just don't see that parking is actually going to be functional. So, Ms. McLean, you have a question, comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Along the same lines, what's the impact on the development if we don't approve the rear yard variance?
It impacts the design of the, so basically it will reduce it to a 2-bedroom home instead of a 3-bedroom home, where we don't have the capacity to fit three reasonable sized bedrooms in the space if we don't have that additional setback. The setback is not related to the parking. It isn't, one does not rely on the other. They're not, just to be clear, we're not asking for the setback in any way to impact the parking. It is for the design of the space.
And what would be the size of these units in square meters or square footage?
Sorry. Can I come back to that question? I don't have that right in front of me.
Yes, certainly.
The footprints are approximately 20 by 30.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Feet, yeah, sorry. So if we're talking.
While I look that up, are there other questions?
Well, I have a question for staff regarding this application, and I guess the question also relates to the parking. Did staff look at the proposed parking setup and undertake an investigation as to whether the parking radiuses are actually going to function, given what you have on the site plan?
I requested that the applicant satisfy themselves that an adequate turning radius would be satisfactory or completable in this area. I didn't receive a turning radius plan demonstrating that this would be satisfactory, but the applicant did say that they were going to ensure that it would be. I just wanted to note that the parking spaces and associated aisles and driveways should be used exclusively for parking and should not be obstructed in any case. And if parking was to remain on site, it should ensure that it would not be dedicated as the walkway between the unit access and around the building.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Linker.
Just to come back to the question around the area. So each space, each unit is 1,370 square feet in total. Would you like that in square meters?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay. All right. There's also a consent as part of this package, and I note that you've given us a rationale for the 4 tests, but you also need to address the 3 requirements for consent, as is noted in the submission requirements that would be online and part of the submission or part of the application, consent application. And so I'll put it to you very briefly. Is the proposal consistent with the provincial policy statement of 2020?
Yes, I believe it is.
And is it your contention that a plan of subdivision is not needed for the proper or orderly development of the municipality? Which is why you're before us with the consent.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Said, is a plan of subdivision not needed for the proper and orderly development of the municipality?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Okay, well, your answer is yes.
Okay, yes. I apologize. I don't.
Yeah. Well, and this is a requirement when you're going through the consent process. And does the proposal have adequate regard for the subdivision criteria in section 5124 of the Planning Act? And there's nine different criteria in section 5124. I'm assuming that that the department has looked at the requirements for consents and is of the opinion that a plan of subdivision is not required. Am I correct, Ms. Linker?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right. So the next time you apply for consent, you need to address the three requirements for consent.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yeah, because it's part and parcel with this. If you can't justify not having a plan of subdivision, then you're going into a very long and expensive process.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions from the panel regarding this application? Are there going to be secondary development units in either of these semis?
Secondary dwelling units?
Dwelling units, yeah.
No, there will not be.
No. Okay, so, all right. So what we have is a consent and minor variances for 2 long semis on Cambridge. And there are conditions, and I just want to make sure that you're aware of all the conditions that the department has identified. Cash in lieu parkland, tree protection and mitigation measures, services capped outside the critical root zone of the trees. A tree planting plan is necessary. Existing dwelling removed and services capped. A servicing plan, standard stuff. Joint use and maintenance agreement, also standard stuff. A grading and drainage plan is also a standard requirement. And either a noise attenuation study or a noise warning on title. So you're aware of those?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And you've gone through the thank you. You've gone through the 4 tests and explained and given us a rationale for why these variances should be approved. Do we wish to reserve on this or vote on it at this time? I'm prepared to decide. We're okay with that? All right. All in favor of the minor variances and the consent application regarding 261 and 263 Cambridge Street North. Your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
And look up the consent rationales for the next for the next piece of property you buy and decide to divide.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilder.
Thank you. If I just may ask, I was checking the link yet for the reserve. So if we can just check file I8.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. I'm sure we've got it in our inbox. Anyway, that concludes the